Has today's theme, that was then, brought up any memories or experiences for you that you would rather keep to yourself? It has for me, but here I am. I'm 65, I just got married. I don't intend to ever date or look for work again. I'm not going to run for public office. I can be candid, even if it's scary. Even if the idea of sharing secrets with this many strangers seems pretty funny. Secrecy has always stopped me from getting help, from asking for critical information when I needed it most. For instance, if I had known how many different kinds of women get beaten up at home, I might have reached out for help before my former husband almost killed me. But I didn't. I had close friends, but I didn't tell anyone. I was too ashamed. I was 26, and I already felt bad about how my life was turning out. 2 years previously, I'd had a psychotic break. I thought the radio was talking to me. I thought Bloomingdale's, a fancy department store in New York City, was being occupied by revolutionaries. I could see the gun barrels over the makeup counter. I called my mother to warn her, and she convinced me to commit myself to a hospital. Now, I don't remember the admitting staff asking much about drugs or alcohol, so I didn't tell them how much I was drinking. I didn't mention all that recreational cocaine. Being a mental patient felt flat and gray and seemed to cancel out any promise I'd shown as a young adult. I thought I was going to be in and out of institutions for the rest of my life. When I left New York, the psychiatrist said, keep taking your medication and find a support group right away. Now, by support group, he probably did not mean the Iron Horseman Motorcycle Club. But one sunny day, as I walked around my new hometown, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I passed the open door of a bar. There were motorcycles parked outside, the jukebox was blaring, there were all these beefy guys in cut-off vests, and for the first time in a really long time, I felt curious. I went in, I ordered a drink. Nobody there cared that I was a mental patient. I'd never met anybody like them. They'd never met anybody like me. It was kind of like being the cool foreign exchange student. I stopped taking medication and just kept drinking. And that's where I met my husband-to-be. He was an unemployed Vietnam vet, a high school dropout, an untrained artist, and loving him became my mission. He called me his rock. I was somebody who could be depended on. The first time he hit me, he cried all night. His big shoulders shook the pull-out couch that we slept on. And for weeks after, he was so remorseful. He treated me like a queen. The secret bonded us. It would never happen again. Until it did. Again and again. Now, there's no good time to get beaten up, but being a battered wife in 1979 felt particularly shameful. The Senate had just passed the Equal Rights Amendment. I couldn't tell my feminist friends, my parents. I didn't leave. We had a baby boy instead, Joshua. It means salvation Now, my husband had a new weapon. He could threaten to take Josh away from me. It seems ridiculous now, but at the time, I believed him. Shame had cut me off from anyone who could reflect back to me reality outside the marriage. So, this particular night, Josh was 3, he was asleep upstairs, his father and I were drunk, and we argued. And he punched me so hard, he ruptured my spleen. After he stormed out, I called a crisis center in another state just to talk. I didn't know how badly I was hurt. There was a weird pain going from my shoulder to my stomach and back. The woman on the phone actually recognized the symptoms. It's a common injury in assaults. I passed out while I was on the phone with her, and somehow she located a volunteer from Safe Place, a local shelter, who came and took me to the emergency room. The doctor who removed my spleen told me that if I had arrived 20 minutes later, I would have died. When I went for my follow-up visit, he ripped the bandage off my stitches and dismissed me. My first thought when I left his office was, I can never go to any of my high school reunions. This does not happen to girls who go to Riverdale Country Day School. Now, you might think at this point I would have told someone, but I just made up a funny story about tripping on one of Joshua's toys and falling down the stairs. I can still remember acting out the fall. I felt if I could make people laugh, the secret was safe. We were broke. I worked part-time in a bar. I had a degree, but no practical skills. I was good at breaking up fights and remembering customers' stories. I learned how to maintenance drink there, how to show up no matter what. We did have affordable housing. Now, our neighborhood was considered an eyesore, but we never locked our doors. There was a local school, there were children for Josh to play with, and I knew I could swing the rent by myself if I had reliable income. I applied for welfare. I did not tell my parents. For food stamps and monthly checks, I mowed park lawns. Being on town assistance felt so public, up there in the open truck with the other losers and the lawnmower. I didn't like being on welfare, but it made me eligible for a training program that offered childcare, transportation, job placement. I was still ashamed, but I was beginning to construct an escape route. About a year later, when I'd completed the program, I alerted my friends, and I asked my neighbors to watch the house and call the police if necessary, so I could tell my husband I wanted a divorce. His first question was, why? His eyes filled up with tears. I thought he was going to kill me, but he just cried and cried. The man who assaulted me carried his own shame and sought help after our marriage ended. I stopped drinking when I was 30 with the help of friends and a very well-known support group. The formula of this support group is very simple. Tell what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Telling the shittiest stories, those that I was most ashamed of, actually threw a lifeline to other people, to those who were experiencing similar things. When I speak there, I own all of those labels that stigmatized me: mental patient, battered wife, welfare mother, drunk, addict. Thanks to the training program, over the next 2 decades, I got a university job. I was able to complete graduate school, to teach and to write. I moved back to New York. I worked for nonprofits. I started a business. And I was able to support our son into adulthood, more or less in one piece. Josh moved to New York in his early 20s, and he had hit every mark that I had missed. Love, satisfying work, creativity, long-term friends, money. He was also a high-functioning drunk. Being his mother had saved me, but I couldn't save him. Alcoholism claimed him at 29. After 15 hospitalizations, residential treatment, relapse after relapse, 10 years ago, on a blistering July day, he died, alone and drunk. Just Benadryl with vodka. He just wanted to sleep. Joshua never accepted addiction as a disease. He never stopped being ashamed of losing control, of feeling that he was letting everyone down. Like me years earlier, he thought that all that fallout was all his fault. I went to a bereavement group in New York after he died, and even there, stigma silenced people when addiction was involved. The other parents there had spouses, financial security, surviving children, and yet they would pull me aside and say, "I envy you. You can say how your child died. My son died of a heart attack while he was in rehab. My daughter died in a car crash when she was drunk. My child overdosed. I don't want anyone to know." I went to get Josh's death certificate at City Hall on a rainy, crummy day. And when I went through security, I just blurted out why I was there. 2 guards, black women in uniform with walkie-talkies on their belt, came out from behind the metal detector and put their arms around me. They didn't try to say anything. They didn't need to. I could not imagine then ever feeling happy about anything again. But almost the instant Josh died, the world turned very kind to me. He felt terrible about how his drinking affected those he loved. So I honor him now by living the most joyous life I can. And it is very joyous. I moved back to Portsmouth. I married an artist I've known for 40 years. I can look out across the mill pond from where we live and see the park where I used to pass out when I was afraid to go home. I work at Ceres Bakery, where I used to go in the 80s. Back then, I'd look across the counter at all those funny, creative women laughing and cooking together, and I would think, that's what I could have been if I hadn't gone crazy. Now I cook there. I work with young people who make me laugh the way Josh always did. Now I have many loved ones, very few secrets, very little shame. TED Fellow Dr. Brené Brown, in her research on vulnerability, correlates shame with eating disorders, bullying, suicide, addiction, depression, family violence, and sexual assault. Shame also correlates with poverty. with race, class, religious, and political beliefs. Now, I must admit, I have probably used the words "they should be ashamed of themselves" more times recently than I have in my entire life. But I know that judgment poisons critical dialogues, blocks collaborations on practical solutions, and keeps us from what Dr. Brown so poignantly calls finding our way back to each other. What kind of culture could we build if we were just more okay with not knowing what to say, just listening, not having the answers, just recounting what happened, what we did, how it turned out? Accepting stigma's silence closes the door on possibilities. It keeps us from learning, from making more informed choices. But worse, it denies us our birthright of human connection. That precious gift that those ladies at City Hall gave me. Just holding space for each other as a different now emerges. Thank you. Oh, Christ. Thank you.